to session 7 of Holy Mess. Today we are talking about the mess of waiting, and we're talking about a woman named Sarah. So when we embark on this journey of waiting, it can feel difficult and it can feel like a struggle. And I shared a little bit in the book about a story that my family and I walked through in this season of waiting for God to give an answer to a call that He had placed on our family. And waiting can feel hard. It can feel intense because when we're waiting, we don't have all the answers. We don't know what the outcome will look like. And in the midst of waiting, we fail to see that the benefit of waiting is growing. Because as we're waiting and we're looking to God, hoping that He will give us the answer that we want or explain what He has planned, we are drawing closer and closer to Him. But there's also another side to the waiting, where we can get ahead of God and we can seek to make our own way rather than be patient and hear what God has to say. And so we see with this story of Sarah that she is doing some intense waiting. We know that God called Abraham out and said, "Go and leave this land, go to the land that I will show you, and I will make you a great nation." And
that was an accident.
Okay, hit stop.
That was an accident.
We know that God called Abraham out and He said to him, "Go to the land that I will show you." And He promises to make him a great nation, that his descendants will be more numerous than the stars. But here's the problem. When God called Abraham out, Abraham was already older. He was in his 70s when God called him out to leave the land that he was in. And he and his wife Sarah had no children. She was barren. And in this culture and time, to be barren meant that you were cursed or that God had left you or forgotten you. And so Sarah, I'm sure by this point, had settled in this life that she felt God had given her. But to hear this promise that God gave to Abraham, I am sure she wondered, would this include me? This woman who could have no children. And so in this traveling and leaving this land and going to the land which God would show them, there was a long journey. And it wasn't just a journey on foot, but it was a journey in the heart, because she had to wait out this promise. They both had to wait out this promise. But Sarah had to wait out the promise and wonder what God was going to do and if His plan included her. So we know that Sarah's impatience got the best of her, and she handed over her handmaid Hagar to her husband to give her a child. Now, in the context of the culture, this was not uncommon. It was very, very common for her to hand over her maiden to her husband so that she could bear children for her. Those children in that culture would then stand as the mistress's children. They would belong to her. And we know that when this happened and this took place and Hagar conceived, it conceived far more than a child. It conceived a mess. Because Sarah was impatient. She got ahead of God. And she sought to take matters into her own hands. It can be easy to do when we're in the midst of a season that feels too difficult and too hard. We are quick to jump ahead of God and try and do His job for Him. Waiting is an expectant action, because when we're waiting, we know that there will be a result at the end. We may not know what that result is, but we know that there will be a result nonetheless. And so we see that Hagar gives birth to a son, and we know that it did not work how culture said it should. Sarah never claimed Hagar's son as her own. She never chose to love him as a mother would, but she was bitter and she was cruel to Hagar at no fault of Hagar's own. And we see this relationship break down all because Sarah decided to get ahead of God in her impatience. So we see that she was ahead of God, that she chose to send Hagar in her stead. But in the midst of all of this, God is still moving. He is still working despite Sarah's choice. And God teaches us in the midst of this that waiting is holy business. God calls us out to waiting seasons so that we will rely on Him and not ourselves. Whether we're waiting for a child that we've prayed for, whether you're a single woman waiting for a husband to come along, whether you're waiting for the right job or reconciliation in relationships, whatever it is that you're waiting for, God teaches us that waiting is holy business, that we should be seeking Him out in prayer. We should be focused on what He wants rather than what we think we need. So Sarah felt that she needed a child to complete this promise of God. But guess what? We don't need to do anything to complete God's promise. He will take care of it all on His own. And we see this come to pass when He reiterates His promise again with Abraham. But this time He says that Sarah will give birth to a son, and his name will be Isaac. And I love this part because it shows her flesh. She starts to laugh at the idea that she can have a son at her age in her 90s. Most 90-year-old women would. But with God, anything is possible. And she laughed at this. And so I love that Isaac's name means laughter, because God is just that kind of God, that He shows us, look, I've got it taken care of. You don't have to worry. You don't have to do anything. I will take care of all the details. And as our family transitioned into a new ministry role in a new church, it was a difficult season as we waited for answers. But once God gave us clarity and peace to go, it was such a blessing to say yes to God. My challenge for you this week is to think about what you are waiting for, whether it's something big or something small. Write it down, pray over it, and ask God to show you how to grow in this place, to grow in this season, and to trust Him while you wait.